Welcome to Landscape Photography World. I'm Grant Swinbourne and I'll be your host on this show discussing the world of landscape photography. In future shows I'll be talking to some of the best landscape photographers that inspire me. We'll be getting to know them better and talk to them about their inspirations and motivations, how they've developed their style and what they do and don't like about being a photographer. I'm keen to explore with you the art of landscape photography, composition, the use of tone and colour, with maybe a little bit of tech talk along the way. What I'm aiming for, though, is to give you a glimpse into the world of landscape photography from the perspective of some of the best landscape photographers out there. I hope you enjoy the show. For now, I'd like to tell you a little bit about myself and how I got into photography and what motivates me and the style of work that I do. I was born in Sydney too many years ago and I've lived here most of my life. I've been lucky enough to be able to travel quite a bit, both for work and also sometimes for fun. I got asked a little while ago how many kilometres I thought I'd travelled, and I'd have to say it's well over 100,000 k's. I've done lots of trips within Australia, both around New South Wales, but also I've visited each state multiple times. But also made several trips to Europe, North and South America, Japan, Southeast Asia and the Pacific, including New Zealand, Fiji and Vanuatu. Sometimes for work, and unfortunately that hasn't given me a lot of time for photography in some of these places. Other times I've revisited for holidays and that's made it a little bit easier. I've still got a lot of places I want to visit, and I hope to be doing some of that as soon as the pandemic looks like it's under control and border restrictions are lifted. I shoot mostly landscapes, lots of seascapes, cityscapes and waterfalls. I've started selling prints online recently and I've had a few shots published in magazines including National Geographic's Spanish language travel magazine Viajes NG. So where did it all start? How did I get into photography and what does it mean to me? Well, my father, he really started me on the photography journey. He was an avid photographer, and I remember as a kid the excitement of slide nights with Dad telling stories of his days in the Navy and his many trips overseas to places like Hong Kong, Vietnam, Singapore and the Philippines. I used to dream of travelling to those places and seeing some of those sites, but also used to really enjoy some of the stories that he told about some of the things that he got up to while he was in the Navy. When I got my first SLR camera, he lent me his old Velbon tripod, and it's one of the very few things of his that I've kept after he died. I really loved looking at his old shots and slides and dreamed of one day travelling to those places and seeing the same sights that he did. He gave me my first camera when I was 10. It was an Agfa AutoStar Pocket and used those 110mm film cassettes, which you'd have to take to the chemist or a newsagent to get sent away to be developed. Usually took somewhere between 3 or 4 days to a week, and the anticipation waiting for those shots to come back as actual photos and the negatives was agony, particularly that first roll of film that I sent in for developing. I was lucky enough in high school to get the opportunity to start playing with the darkroom equipment that they had there and get into the magic of developing negatives and enlarging onto photo paper. I remember the first time I developed an image, seeing it begin to appear in the fixing tray and feeling so excited that I was able to take the image from the camera in the darkroom and actually onto a print. The magic of seeing it appear as if from nothing on a blank piece of paper really captivated me. In my 20s I saved up and I bought my first SLR. That was the Minolta XG1 with a couple of lenses, all of which I still have. I keep them on the bookcase behind my desk and remind myself occasionally of where my SLR journey started back in the very early 80s. I struggled to afford a darkroom setup, so most of my shots from that time were still lab developed, which when I look back on it was probably just as expensive as buying the gear and doing it myself over the years. I did do a little bit of development of negatives using a development tank and a darkroom bag, which you'd wrap around the tank and keep things nice and dark. But I didn't go much past that, as it was an expensive proposition to get into. Then the digital age came along a few years later. By that time I'd started a career and gotten married and had kids, so buying anything other than point and shoots was never really a priority for me. I still like playing around with editing a bit, and started to get into the early stages of Photoshop and GIMP and a few other tools. After a few years though, I took the plunge and bought my first DSLR. It wasn't anything flash. It was a Canon 500D with a couple of kit lenses. Gradually the appetite for improving on what I could do and the gear that I had, after starting to stretch some of the limitations of it, that became too much, and I progressed to better bodies and lenses over the years. And I've finally landed on the current setup, which is a 6D, based around a 6D Mark II. I chose that largely because it had a number of features which I've found really useful, including the wireless capability, where I can connect my phone via Wi-Fi to the camera and remote control it and be able to review and see the images directly on my phone. I find that really useful, particularly when I'm out doing long exposures or seascapes, where I can sort of set things up and stand back a little bit and watch the scene while I'm taking a very long exposure. I've worked with mostly Canon bodies and lenses, Nissi filters, and Surui. I've got a Surui carbon fibre tripod at the moment. I usually shoot wide using the 16 to 35 f2.8L lens, but I also like doing long range landscapes using the 70 to 200 f2.8L. I haven't made the switch to mirrorless yet, but I'm keeping a close eye on developments and might be looking to switch in the next 12 months or so. So far I'm getting great value out of the 6D, and I'm not quite ready to part with it. I know how it works, I know what I'm doing with it, and yeah, there might be some cute features on some of the R's or some of the other mirrorless formats that are out there, but as I say, I'm enjoying what I've got now. Gear to me isn't the most important thing, though. Having good gear and good glass, the better the lens, the better the end product. It's really about, for me, how you actually compose a shot and pull it together, and then what your creative vision is once you actually get it into post-processing, etc. Alongside collecting better gear came a lot of time spent learning how to shoot and edit better. I'm still learning a lot and really enjoying seeing the growth in my work from the early days. In some ways I'd wish I'd got into it sooner than I had, but it is what it is, and I'm definitely enjoying where photography has taken me in the past few years. I joined a few sites and forums. There's a really good forum of Australian photographers which taught me a load of tips and tricks to improve on what I was doing, what to look out for in compositions, etc. And I find learning by watching and listening to what others are doing really works for me. And I started to sort of subscribe to a lot of YouTube channels like Flern and F64 and a few other landscape photography channels. But other than my early high school education, I'm mostly self-taught when it comes to learning the craft. Learning what other people are doing, seeing what works for me, experimenting. And for me, that's a big part of why I do what I do. I like the experimentation. I like looking at things a little bit differently and trying to work out new and different ways of getting results. So why landscape photography? I guess mainly because I'm a fairly major introvert. I've always been happiest with my own company. I'm not saying I don't enjoy spending time with friends, and I've had some great time shooting with mates and other people I've met along the way, but I get a real charge from the time I can spend inside my own head working a composition, trying different angles, and then working my settings to nail what I'm feeling from the shoot. The thought of dealing with people and doing portraits, telling them how to sit and hold their heads, etc., to be honest, just leaves me feeling really exhausted. I'm not into it, and it's probably not something that I have shot people in portraits, mostly family and friends and so forth, but for me it doesn't give me the same joy that standing knee deep in a wave or a stream, capturing great light with flowing water and a bit of, a nice sunset with some cloud. That to me is pure bliss. I love long exposures and I love interesting light, and that just feeds a beast inside me. And whether it's a banger of a sunrise or sunset, I know that I can usually make something interesting to me at least, and hopefully others might like it as well. I started looking at the shots that I saw, on sites around the internet, like 500 pixels, DeviantArt, etc., and wondered how some of the photographers managed the dynamic range as well as they did, because I, started using ND filters and graduated filters and whatever, and for me there was always a little bit lacking in that. Yes, you can get great results using filters and potentially get the shot in one go in camera, but what I was seeing on some of these shots looked way beyond that, and that was when I started to get into exposure bracketing and then using exposure blending, using luminosity masks to blend those multiple exposures and then bring the control of the highlights and shadows. It also brings the ability to add or subtract details from the final result, because you've got multiple shots taken from exactly the same angle. Learning these techniques also helps when it comes to making composites. I don't do a lot of composites, but I do some. And knowing how to use layers and what each layer is doing in Photoshop, to the final result really makes it easy to pull together that final image and make the fine-tune adjustments to almost every aspect, whether it's colour, tone, highlights, shadows. The selective editing makes the biggest difference on how to make an image look the way that you want, and for me it gives total creative control over the output. If you're not doing selective editing, then it's something you really need to explore. I'm not saying that you can't get good results with global changes, but global changes don't give you the same level of control, and you might push a shadow or a highlight, and that then changes your tone and changes your ability to control the overall end result. And it's that shifting and moving about that really is the magic source in a lot of what I do anyway. And I know there's a lot of people out there that already know this stuff, but this isn't speaking to you necessarily. It's really speaking to the people that are still messing around with global edits and starting to learn their way through it. Some will say, composites and those sorts of things and blending, isn't really photography. It's really, being able to edit. To me, though, those techniques like blending and composite building, they've been around since the very early days of photography. It was just done in a dark room with chemicals. And some of the biggest names like Hurley, Frank Hurley and Ansel Adams, they created composites either to tell a story of the experience they're trying to convey, or simply to make them a more interesting image. And to me, that's part of the creative process, and I don't see that using Photoshop to enhance or change aspects of your image necessarily isn't photography. If you've taken the image and you've edited, it's a darkroom process. It might be called Lightroom or it might be called Photoshop, but to me it's still that processing, and it's giving you the control over how the image ends up looking. And that's really what photography is for me. It's being able to express the feeling that I had standing in a stream or standing watching the sunrise or sunset, and getting the viewer to look at that and go, yeah, I feel that, that something out of that image. It's not about whether or not the every element in it was actually right there at that one time. Most of what I do though is exposure blending from within, say, 3 to 5 seconds, particularly flow shots. Most of those are sub-second shots, and it's really going click, 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 taking the shots that I need to get me what I want for the processing, and then the processing pulls all of those elements together to give me the dynamic range that I'm looking for. I've been kind of restricted though recently in shooting in my local area, and with the current lockdown can't even get out to shoot anything interesting within 10k's. I live in Western Sydney, and it's literally suburbia, and there's people that do that sort of thing, but it doesn't just it's not something that grabs me. So I haven't been getting out shooting in the past few weeks because of the lockdown. The lack of opportunities to get into international locations as well has been a bit of a frustration. But it's made me reevaluate what I've been doing in the past, and allowed me to dive into my archives and reprocess some of those old works with fresh eyes and new techniques that I've learnt over the years. And to me, that's what that sort of time that you're given. Use it wisely and learn new stuff, and use that against stuff that you've already got in your archives, and reprocess and see how you can actually make an image better, or if you can replicate the original result that you got using new techniques. That can be a quite an interesting stylistic aspect to what you're doing. I started developing my style a few years ago when I started to use those bracketed exposures and luminosity masks. I largely work with only 2 ND filters now, a 3-stop and a 10-stop, and I found that I can shoot long exposures with full dynamic range, and that's opened up a lot of possibilities for creative control over how I make the images. The biggest challenge in doing that style of shooting though is making sure that you got the time to set up, take the shots and edit. You have to like editing, so if you don't like editing, it's not really going to be for you necessarily. The style of work means you need to understand your shooting and your processing workflows quite well, and know your way around your tools. Learning to do this thing, learning to do things this way has been an interesting journey, and I can see a marked difference between the early work that I was producing and the work that I produce now. Doing lots of long exposure seascapes also means that you sometimes need to get your feet wet, and that's really my happy place. As I said, standing knee deep in waves flowing over a rock shelf on the coast near where I live is where I'd love to spend a lot of time, and quite frankly do, winter, summer, spring, autumn. Whilst I've never actually fallen in, safety is really a critical aspect to that. So if you are exploring out on rock shelves, make sure that you're wearing the right sort of shoes or cleats. And if the tides and seas are looking dodgy, don't take chances and get too near the edge, and make sure that you've sort of worked out what your line of escape is in case there is a bigger than usual wave that you need to run away from. Before I venture out and start wading into water, I normally spend some time watching what the waves are doing. Knowing what the tides are doing is really important as well. You can easily find yourself trapped in some location that looked fine at low tide but's a death trap at high tide. And it's vital if you're entering a sea cave, for example, knowing what the sea conditions and what the tides are actually doing. some of those locations are completely inaccessible at high tides, and if you time your shoot wrong, linger too long in the wrong spot, it might not end well. So be careful when you're out there shooting, and take the time to familiarise yourself with what's going on. I remember, though, whilst I haven't fallen in or haven't injured myself or got hurt, I have actually damaged a couple of cameras. I remember one dawn shoot out at North Curl. I was on the rock shelf out in front of the pool there, and the 6D Mark II just decided to die. Only seemed to have gotten a light splash from a wave, which honestly came across the shelf at ankle height. But it splashed up off the lip of a rock and splashed over the top of the camera a little. What I didn't realise though was that repeated soakings had actually over the past couple of years had actually started to corrode some of the parts inside, because when I took it to get it repaired, they had to replace a couple of the boards and make sure that the weather sealing, etc., was back in place. Luckily, it didn't take too long, cost a bit, but managed to get the repair done fairly quickly, and I was back out shooting again. I guess that tuning into things like tides and seasons and so forth, that's something that photography has really brought to me over the years. And I've kind of started to work out how to read conditions, particularly in my local area. And that sense of what's going on can really help you understand where and when to shoot, as well as how a composition's likely to work. It's no good turning up at a place, that's great at high tide when the tide's low, and vice versa. You've got to go to the right place at the right time. I mean, there are some places that you can go to where the tides aren't going to matter. It's also not worth turning up to a waterfall in the middle of a drought. You really kind of need to be there, not necessarily while it's raining, but very soon after rain. Some of those waterfalls that I shoot, they don't flow a lot unless there is some rain. So you got to understand what the weather's doing. And so, if the clouds and the sunrise, etc., look like they're going to be in the right spot, then I might go to a beach. But I might also choose that same day, if it's looking really cloudy and murky, and you're not going to get a great sunrise or sunset, then head out to a waterfall somewhere and take shots there, because that low light, the even light that you get through clouds, etc., that flat light really can help when you're shooting things like waterfalls. So understanding your conditions is absolutely vital. I find it something that I now look at those predictions on things like clear outside and windy and so forth. I use a few apps like those, Photo Pills, Photographer's Ephemeris, and they can at least give you an idea about what conditions are going to be like. The tides are always going to be fairly accurate, but you're still not sure what you're going to get with waves. So the predictions that you get in there, whilst they might not be precise because they are forecasts and predictions, they're a pretty good tool to give you an idea about whether or not shooting a sunrise or a particular location is going to be worthwhile. Sometimes you don't get what you think you're going to get when you look at the apps, but sometimes I just shoot anyway because you get what you get. Weather is going to be weather, but knowing what it's going to be like and being able to read what those weather conditions and tides are going to be like, I think something that's really worth learning as a photographer. And the more you do it, the more in tune you get with it, and it just becomes second nature, and you know where to go and where to shoot when. Along with this podcast, I'm also starting to launch a few other photography-based ventures. Some of you that follow me on Instagram will know about plans that I've got for launching workshops once the lockdown is over, and Sydney can get out and about and shoot again. There'll be more on that in episodes to come. I've also launched my own print website, grantswinbournephotography.com, for print sales, and as a way of showcasing my portfolio. If you'd like to have a print, or you can either order them online directly or contact me, via DM on Instagram or Twitter or Facebook, and I can arrange prints. You can also find me on Instagram at Grant Swinbourne, Twitter G Swinbourne, and on Facebook, of course, Grant Swinbourne Photo or Grant Swinbourne Photography. I hope you've enjoyed this first show and will join me next time on Landscape Photography World. I hope to have a few guests coming, and I hope you enjoy the show as we progress and make something worthwhile out of it. I'm Grant Swinbourne and hope to see you soon out shooting. Thanks.